The Vortani Empire had carved their bloody path across 3 galaxies for over 2,000 years. Their biomechanical vessels, living ships that pulsed with alien intelligence, had never known defeat. Each conquered world added to their collective knowledge, their ships growing stronger and more adaptive. The massive Vortani flagship Devourer drifted through the debris field that had once been the proud Kalari homeworld. Its living hull rippled like muscle tissue, dark veins of energy, coursing beneath its surface as it fed on the wreckage of defeated enemy ships. The biomechanical beast stretched nearly 3 kilometers from its razor-sharp bow to its thruster-studded tail, a nightmare fusion of alien technology and living organism. Admiral Kyung-min stood on the bridge, his tall frame silhouetted against the massive viewing wall that displayed the carnage outside. His cybernetic implants glowed with a cold blue light, neural interfaces that connected him directly to the ship's alien consciousness. He watched with satisfaction as smaller Vortani vessels swarmed over the remaining Kalari defense platforms, like hungry predators. The insectoid resistance lasted exactly 6 hours and 14 minutes, reported his lieutenant, her voice carrying the mechanical tone of someone enhanced with too much alien technology. Their quantum shields proved ineffective against our adaptive weaponry. Kyung-min nodded slowly, feeling the ship's pleasure through their neural link. The Devourer had learned much from this battle. The Kalari had possessed impressive defensive technology, but like every other species they had encountered, they had made one fatal mistake. They had fought the same way twice. The bioship's consciousness whispered in his mind, showing him tactical data from the engagement. The Kalari had started strong, their crystalline warships firing devastating energy beams that had actually damaged several Vortani vessels. But the biomechanical ships had adapted within minutes, their living hulls developing new defensive patterns, while their weapons evolved to counter each Kalari tactic. "Sir, we are receiving surrender broadcasts from the remaining population." "Centers," another officer reported from his organic console, tendrils of the ship interfacing directly with his nervous system. Through the viewing wall, Kyung-min could see the dying planet below. Kalari cities glowed like scattered jewels across the dark continents, but many were already going dark as the survivors powered down their defenses. The insectoid species had been proud warriors, their chitinous warriors fierce in ground combat. But pride meant nothing against the Vortani war machine. The admiral walked across the bridge, his boots making wet sounds on the organic floor. The ship's interior was a disturbing blend of technology and biology. Walls pulsed with a faint heartbeat, cables that looked more like arteries carried information and power, and every control surface was a hybrid of mechanical precision and living tissue. It was beautiful and terrible, like everything the Vortani had created. "Begin the harvesting process," Kyung-min commanded, "but preserve their military databases. I want to understand their shield technology before we move to the next system." The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, their cybernetic enhancements allowing them to interface directly with the ship's biomechanical systems. On the main display, Kyung-min watched as specialized harvesting ships descended toward the planet. These smaller vessels would collect not just resources and technology, but also biological samples from the conquered species. The Vortani way of war was not just about destruction, it was about evolution. Every defeated enemy made them stronger, their bioships incorporating new defensive measures, new weapons, new tactics. They had started their campaign of conquest with primitive vessels, but each victory had added layers of sophistication and power. The Devourer shuddered slightly as it began absorbing the wreckage of a particularly large Kalari battlecruiser. Kyung-min felt the ship's satisfaction through their neural link as new knowledge flowed into the collective consciousness. The Kalari had developed an interesting particle beam configuration that the bioship would now add to its own weapon systems. "Admiral," his tactical officer called out, her voice carrying excitement. "We have located their historical archives. The Kalari maintained detailed records of other species in this galactic arm, including defensive capabilities and fleet strengths." Kyung-min smiled, the expression made more unsettling by the cybernetic replacements around his left eye. "Excellent. Upload everything to the collective. What does it tell us about the next targets?" The tactical display shifted, showing a 3-dimensional map of the local galactic arm. Red markers indicated worlds the Votani had already conquered, while yellow markers showed the remaining unconquered systems. At the edge of the display, a cluster of blue markers caught his attention. The archives indicate a species called humans occupying approximately 47 systems in this region, the officer reported. According to Kelari intelligence, they are relatively primitive. No biomechanical technology, limited faster-than-light capability, and their largest warships are barely 800 meters in length. Another easy conquest, then. Kyung-min had seen this pattern countless times. A young species full of courage and determination, convinced that their primitive weapons could somehow stand against the biomechanical might of the Vortani Empire. They always fell within days, sometimes hours. The Devourer pulsed around. Him, its living systems already beginning to plot courses toward human space. Soon they would add another species to their collection, another stepping stone in their endless march across the galaxy. Captain Dong-hyun was 3 days into his routine supply run to the Kepler station when his ship's proximity alarms started screaming. The Morning Star was a typical human cargo freighter, nothing special to look at with its boxy hull and practical design. It carried medical supplies, food processors, and a few dozen crates of Korean instant noodles that the colonists specifically requested from Earth. "What the hell is that?" muttered his co-pilot Min-soo, staring at the sensor display with wide eyes. The readings made no sense. Something massive had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel less than 1,000 kilometers away, but it wasn't. Showing up like any ship they had ever seen. Dong-hyun leaned forward in his captain's chair, squinting at the readings. The object was huge, easily 10 times the size of the largest human battleship, but its energy signature was unlike anything in their databases. Instead of the clean geometric patterns of human or known alien technology, this thing pulsed and flowed like something alive. "Switch to visual," he ordered, and the main screen flickered to show the space ahead of them. Both men fell silent. The alien vessel looked like some nightmare creature from the deepest ocean, its dark hull rippling with organic movement. Bioluminescent veins ran along its surface, pulsing with alien light. It had the basic shape of a warship, but everything about it screamed that this was something that had grown rather than been built. "Captain," Min-soo whispered, his voice shaking, "we should run. That thing is scanning us." Dong-hyun felt the fear too, a cold knot in his stomach as he watched the alien ship's sensor arrays focus on their tiny freighter. But alongside the fear was something else, something that had always driven humanity to explore the unknown. Curiosity. "Open a communication channel," he said quietly. "Sir, are you insane?" Min-soo grabbed his arm. "That thing could vaporize us without even trying." "Maybe," Dong-hyun agreed, his fingers dancing over the control panel. "But look at it, Min-soo. Really look at it. That's not just advanced technology, that's something completely different. Living metal, biological computers, maybe even a hybrid consciousness. Do you have any idea what we could learn?" The communication system crackled to life, and Dong-hyun took a deep breath before speaking into the microphone. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Dong-hyun of the cargo freighter. Morning Star, Earth Registry Number HS4429, your ship design. Here's absolutely fascinating. Is that living tissue integrated with metal components?" Silence stretched across space for long seconds. Min-soo was staring at his captain like he had lost his mind, while the alien ship continued its slow approach. Its biomechanical hull seemed to ripple more intensely, as if reacting to the communication. When the response came, it was in perfect Korean, though the voice carried an electronic undertone that made both humans shiver. "You are human." It wasn't a question, but a statement filled with something that might have been surprise. "That's right," Dong-hyun replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "And you are?" "I am Admiral Kyung-min of the Vortani Empire." "You do not fear us, human?" Dong-hyun glanced at Min-soo, who was frantically working at his console, no doubt trying to get their faster-than-light drive online. The captain made a decision. That would change everything. "Fear and fascination aren't mutually exclusive," he said calmly. "Your biomechanical technology is unlike anything we've encountered. The integration of organic and synthetic systems is remarkable." Would you be interested in a cultural exchange? We have coffee." The silence that followed was even longer this time. Through the viewscreen, they could see smaller vessels emerging from the massive alien ship, sleek biomechanical fighters that moved through space like swimming predators. "Coffee?" The alien admiral's voice carried what might have been amusement. "It's a stimulant beverage we enjoy," Dong-hyun explained, even as his hands moved quickly over his control panel. He wasn't just making conversation. Every second of this exchange was being recorded, and his sensors were gathering unprecedented data about the alien vessel. Made from roasted beans, it helps us think more clearly. Min-soo caught on to what his captain was doing and began running deep scans on the alien ship, pushing their sensors to maximum range. The biomechanical vessel was so different from human technology that every reading was valuable intelligence. "You are curious about our ships," Admiral Kyung-min observed. "This is unusual. Most species beg for mercy or attack us immediately. Most species probably haven't spent the last 3 centuries dreaming about meeting other intelligent life," Dong-hyun replied. "We're explorers by nature. Your ships represent evolutionary leaps we haven't even imagined." The alien fighters were circling now, their biomechanical hulls gleaming with that same organic light. Dong-hyun knew they were probably weapons systems beyond human comprehension, but he also knew this conversation was worth more than his life. "Tell me," he continued, "how do you maintain the balance between biological and mechanical systems? The power requirements alone must be enormous." Admiral Kyung-min's laugh was genuinely amused this time. "You would study us even as we prepare to destroy you. Knowledge is never wasted," Dong-hyun said simply. "Even if we don't survive this encounter, others will benefit from what we learn." The transmission cut off suddenly, and the alien fighters opened fire. The Morning Star had no shields, no weapons, no chance of survival, but as the biomechanical energy beams tore through their hull, Dong-hyun managed one final act. "Data." "Packet transmitted," he said to Min-soo as the bridge filled with smoke and sparks. "Earth will know what's coming." The Morning Star exploded in a brief flare of light, but its final transmission was already racing toward Earth at faster-than-light speed, carrying detailed sensor readings and the complete conversation with Admiral Kyung-min. Captain Dong-hyun's curiosity and sacrifice had just given humanity its first real look at the biomechanical terror heading their way. 3 months after Captain Dong-hyun's sacrifice, the Vortani warfleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. Admiral Kyung-min stood on the bridge of the Devourer, expecting to see the familiar sight of panicked enemy fleets scrambling to mount a desperate defense. Instead, he found something that had never happened in 2,000 years of conquest. Silence. Seoul. Solar system appeared almost empty. No massive defense fleets, no orbital battle stations, no frantic communications begging for mercy. The Vortani bioships pulsed with confusion as their living sensors swept through space, finding only the usual civilian traffic and a few scattered patrol vessels that seemed to be maintaining normal operations. "This is unusual," muttered his tactical officer, her cybernetic implants flickering as she interfaced with the ship's organic computers. "According to our intelligence, humans have over 300 warships in their fleet. Where are they?" Kyung-min frowned, his enhanced vision studying the tactical display. Earth hung in the distance like a blue-green jewel, seemingly undefended, except for a handful of orbital platforms that looked more like space stations than military installations. It was almost insulting. "Perhaps they fled," suggested another officer. "Some species abandon their homeworld when they realize resistance is futile," but even as he said it, Kyung-min knew that wasn't right. The human captain they had encountered 3 months ago hadn't shown any signs of cowardice. Dong-hyun had faced certain death with curiosity rather than fear, asking technical questions, even as the biomechanical fighters prepared to destroy his ship. "Sir," the communications officer called out, her voice carrying surprise. "We're receiving a transmission from Mars orbit. A single human vessel is hailing us." The main display shifted to show a human warship orbiting the red planet. It was small by Vortani standards, maybe 800 meters long, with the angular, Design typical of human engineering. Nothing like the flowing organic curves of biomechanical technology. Put them through, Kyungmin ordered, genuinely curious about what the humans were planning. The view screen flickered, showing the bridge of the human vessel. A man in a blue military uniform stood at attention in front of the camera, his face calm and determined. Behind him, Kyungmin could see other human officers working at their stations with the same quiet professionalism. Vortani Empire, the human said in clear, unaccented Standard Galactic. I am Captain Jiho of the Earth Defense Force destroyer, Resilience. I speak for all of humanity. Kyungmin leaned forward in his biomechanical throne, intrigued despite himself. You are alone, human. Where are your fleets? Captain Jiho's expression didn't change. That's not important right now. What matters is this. My ship challenges your entire fleet to single combat. Defeat the Resilience and humanity will surrender all our colonies without resistance. Every human world, every space station, every settlement in our territory will submit to Vortani rule. The bridge of the Devourer fell completely silent. Even the bioship's organic systems seemed to pause in confusion. In 2,000 years of conquest, no species had ever made such an offer. The idea of a single small vessel challenging an entire warfleet was so absurd it bordered on madness. Admiral Kyungmin began to laugh. The sound started as a chuckle, but grew into genuine amusement that echoed through the living corridors of his flagship. Around him, his officers joined in, their cybernetic enhancements creating an eerie electronic harmony. One small vessel against our armada? Kyungmin said, his voice carrying across the communication channel. Captain Jiho, do you understand what you're suggesting? We have 57 capital ships, each one larger and more powerful than anything in your fleet. We have biomechanical technology that has conquered 3 galaxies, and you think your single destroyer can stand against? Captain Jiho's face remained completely serious. I'm not thinking anything, Admiral. I'm making you an offer. Single combat. Winner takes all. The laughter died away as Kyungmin studied the human captain more carefully. There was no fear in those eyes, no desperation, just calm determination and something else, something that looked almost like confidence. Why would you make such an offer? The Admiral asked. Surely you know it's suicide. Maybe, Jiho replied. But it's also the most honorable way for humanity to face extinction. If we're going to die anyway, we might as well do it on our own terms. The bioship whispered in Kyungmin's mind, its alien consciousness intrigued by this unusual development. The Devourer had been looking forward to a proper battle, a chance to test its evolved capabilities against human technology. This offer would provide that opportunity while also serving as entertainment for the entire fleet. You intrigue me. Captain Jiho, Kyungmin said finally. Very well, we accept your challenge, but understand this. When your ship is destroyed, humanity's surrender will be absolute. No resistance, no guerrilla warfare, no heroic last stands. Agreed, Jiho replied without hesitation. You have my word as an officer of the Earth Defense Force. The communication ended, and the Resilience began moving away from Mars, heading toward open space where the battle would take place. The human destroyer looked pitifully small compared to the massive Vortani bioships, like a minnow swimming among sharks. Kyungmin settled back in his throne, feeling the ship's anticipation through their neural link. This would indeed be amusing. The humans had impressed him with their courage, but courage meant nothing against superior technology. The Devourer alone could destroy a dozen ships like the Resilience without difficulty. Shall we deploy the full fleet, sir? Asked his tactical officer. No, Kyungmin replied, watching the human ship take position several thousand kilometers away. I will face them alone. The Devourer is more than sufficient for this task. As the two ships faced each other across the void, neither the Admiral nor his crew realized they were about to become part of humanity's greatest deception. Captain Jiho and the Resilience weren't humanity's last desperate gambit. They were the bait in a trap 3 months in the making, a trap that would turn the Vortani's greatest strength into their ultimate weakness. The biomechanical flagship pulsed with hunger, eager to feed on another defeated enemy. Soon it would learn that some prey bite back. The battle began exactly as Admiral Kyungmin had expected. The Resilience opened fire first, its plasma cannons sending bright orange streams of energy across space toward the massive biomechanical flagship. The weapons struck the Devourer's living hull, causing brief flares of light as the organic armor absorbed and dispersed the impact. Captain Ji-ho stood calmly on his bridge as his ship shuddered under return fire. The Vortani bioweapons were unlike anything humanity had faced before. Instead of simple energy beams, they fired living projectiles that burrowed into the target's hull like parasites before exploding from within. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported his tactical officer Su-jin, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Sealing emergency bulkheads." "Keep firing," Ji-ho ordered, watching through the view screen as more Vortani bioprojectiles slammed into his ship. The Resilience was tough for a human destroyer, but it was like a paper airplane fighting a hurricane. The Devourer moved through space with predatory grace, its biomechanical systems adapting to each human weapon within minutes. The ship's living hull actually learned from each impact, developing new defensive patterns that made subsequent attacks less effective. "Captain," called out his engineer Wu Jin from the damage control station, "we're losing life support on the lower decks. The bioweapons are interfering with our electronic systems somehow." Ji-ho nodded grimly. The Vortani technology was even more advanced than their intelligence had suggested. The living projectiles weren't just explosive. They were designed to disrupt enemy ship systems, turning each hit into a cascading failure that weakened the target for the killing blow. On the Devourer's bridge, Admiral Kyung-min watched the battle with growing satisfaction. The human ship was fighting bravely, but the outcome was never in doubt. His biomechanical flagship had absorbed dozens of plasma cannon hits without suffering any real damage, while the Resilience was already showing signs of critical systems failure. "The humans fight well for primitives," commented his tactical officer, "but their weapons cannot penetrate our adaptive armor." "Indeed," Kyung-min agreed, feeling the ship's hunger through their neural link. The Devourer wanted to feed, to absorb the enemy vessel and add its technology to the collective knowledge. "Prepare the feeding tendrils. We'll consume them slowly." The Resilience shuddered as massive biomechanical tentacles erupted from the Vortani flagship's hull. These organic appendages moved through space like enormous snakes, each one tipped with razor-sharp feeding mechanisms designed to tear apart enemy vessels and digest their components. "Here they come," Ji-ho said, quietly, watching the feeding tendrils approach his dying ship. Around him, his crew continued their duties with professional calm, even as their destroyer fell apart around them. The first tendril punched through the Resilience's weakened hull with a sound like breaking bones. Emergency alarms screamed as atmosphere vented into space and the ship's lights flickered as power systems failed. More tendrils followed, wrapping around the human vessel like the arms of some cosmic octopus. "Hull integrity at 15%, Su-jin reported, her console sparking as biomechanical parasites invaded the ship's computer systems. "We have maybe 5 minutes before complete structural failure." Captain Ji-ho smiled for the first time since the battle began. "That's all we need." As the Devourer's feeding process continued, the biomechanical flagship began absorbing not just the Resilience's hull material, but everything inside it. Furniture, equipment, computer databases, and even biological samples from the human crew all flowed through the feeding tendrils into the alien ship's living digestive systems. Admiral Kyung-min felt the ship's satisfaction as it processed the new information. Human technology was primitive but had some interesting design concepts. Their computer systems used quantum processing in ways the Vortani hadn't considered. Their hull materials included alloys that could be useful for future ship construction, but buried deep within the Resilience's hull, hidden in what appeared to be a standard maintenance compartment, was something that would change everything. A small cylindrical device no larger than a human fist, containing humanity's most dangerous creation. For 3 months, Earth's best scientists had worked around the clock, using Captain Dong-hyun's sensor data to understand Vortani biomechanical technology. They had discovered that the alien ships shared information through biological networks, like a nervous system, connecting all the vessels in the fleet. This discovery led to a terrible realization and an even more terrible solution. The device contained a genetically engineered retrovirus designed specifically to target the organic components of Vortani biotechnology. It had been coded with one simple instruction: multiply and spread. As the feeding tendrils absorbed the device, the virus activated. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The devourer continued its feeding process, breaking down the last remnants of the human destroyer. But deep within the flagship's living tissue, microscopic warfare had begun. The virus spread through the ship's organic systems like wildfire, rewriting genetic codes and disrupting biological processes. The devourer's immune systems tried to fight back, but the virus had been designed by humans who understood something the Vortani had forgotten in their millennia of conquest. Biological systems, no matter how advanced, could always be hacked. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, her voice carrying confusion, "we're receiving distress signals from the outer fleet vessels." Kyung-min turned from watching the Resilience's final destruction. "Distress signals? From whom?" "From our own ships, sir. They're reporting system malfunctions across their biomechanical networks. The virus had jumped from the devourer to the rest of the fleet through their shared biological communication system. What had been their greatest strength, the ability to share information and tactics instantly across all vessels, had become their greatest weakness. On ship after ship, the organic components began failing. But the virus didn't just destroy. It corrupted. It turned the ship's feeding instincts against each other, making them see fellow Vortani vessels as enemies to be consumed. "Sir!" the tactical officer shouted, her cybernetic implants sparking as the ship's systems went haywire. "The fleet is opening fire on itself." Through the viewscreen, Admiral Kyung-min watched in horror as his magnificent war fleet began tearing itself apart. Biomechanical ships that had conquered galaxies now turned their weapons on each other in a feeding frenzy, their corrupted systems unable to distinguish friend from foe. The devourer itself shuddered as the virus reached its central nervous system. Kyung-min felt the ship's confusion and growing hunger through their neural link, but now that hunger was directed at the nearest source of biomechanical energy, the other Vortani vessels. Captain Jiho's sacrifice had become humanity's greatest victory. The impossible had happened. The unstoppable Vortani Empire was destroying itself from within, and it had taken just one human ship to make it happen. The Vortani fleet was eating itself alive. Across the solar system, 57 biomechanical warships that had conquered 3 galaxies turned their weapons on each other in a cannibalistic nightmare. The virus had corrupted their most basic instincts, making them see fellow ships as prey to be consumed. Admiral Kyung-min clutched his command throne as the devourer shuddered around him, its living hull writhing in agony. Through his neural implants, he could feel the ship's confusion and pain as the engineered retrovirus rewrote its genetic code. What had once been a proud flagship was becoming a mad beast, hungry for the biomechanical energy of its own fleet. "Admiral," his communications officer screamed, her cybernetic implants sparking as the ship's organic systems failed. "The Predator is firing on the destroyer. They're both requesting permission to feed on each other." Through the viewscreen, Kyung-min watched the impossible sight of his war fleet tearing itself apart. The Predator, a kilometer-long biomechanical cruiser, had wrapped its feeding tendrils around a smaller vessel and was literally devouring it alive. But the smaller ship was fighting back, its bioweapons carving chunks out of the larger vessel's hull. "Sir, we're receiving feeding requests from 12 different ships," another officer reported, his voice breaking with panic. "They all want to consume us." The devourer's bridge pulsed with infected bioluminescence as the virus spread through its nervous system. Kyung-min could feel the ship's hunger growing stronger, its organic consciousness becoming more primitive and savage. Soon it would lose all higher reasoning and become nothing more than a feeding machine. But even as his flagship died around him, Kyung-min heard something that chilled him to his cybernetic core. A human voice broadcasting on all frequencies across the Vortani communication network. "To all who hear this message," came the calm voice of Captain Jiho, I am speaking to you from the bridge of the Earth Defense Force destroyer Resilience, moments before our destruction. The transmission was being carried by the same biomechanical network that had spread the virus. Every surviving Vortani ship, every conquered world, every communication relay in their empire was receiving the human captain's final words. The Vortani Empire has conquered galaxies because you only understood one thing. Brute force, Jiho continued, his voice steady even as his ship was being torn apart around him. You never learned to recognize patience, sacrifice, and the human ability to turn an enemy's strength against them. Kyungmin tried to shut off the transmission, but the virus had corrupted his ship's communication systems. The human's words echoed through the bridge as biomechanical alarms screamed their warnings. We humans don't conquer through fear, Captain Jiho said. We endure, we adapt, and we always find a way. You made one critical mistake when you destroyed Captain Donghyun and the Morning Star. You gave us 3 months to study you, to understand you, and to prepare. Around the solar system, the few Vortani ships that still retained some sanity were trying to escape. But the virus was spreading faster than they could run, jumping from ship to ship through their shared biomechanical networks. What had once been their greatest advantage was now their doom. This virus spreading through your fleet was designed using the sensor data that Captain Donghyun died to provide, Jiho's voice continued. Every question he asked, every reading his ship took, every moment of that conversation was planned. We knew you would destroy him. We counted on it. Admiral Kyungmin felt something he had never experienced in 2,000 years of conquest. Fear, not fear of death, but fear of the implications. The humans had sacrificed their own people as part of a plan. They had let the Vortani destroy an innocent cargo ship just to gather intelligence. You see, Admiral Kyungmin, the human captain said, and the admiral realized with shock that Jiho was speaking directly to him. We learned something about your species from studying Captain Donghyun's recordings. You're not just conquerors, you're victims of your own success. The Devourer lurched as another Vortani cruiser fired on it, mistaking the flagship for prey. Kyungmin's tactical officers were dead, their cybernetic implants overloaded by the ship's corrupted systems. He was alone on a bridge that was slowly dissolving around him. Your biomechanical technology made you so powerful that you forgot how to think like prey, Jiho's voice explained calmly. You forgot that sometimes the smallest creature can kill the largest predator if it's clever enough and desperate enough. Through his failing neural link, Kyungmin could sense the death throes of his empire. Across 3 galaxies, Vortani fleets were receiving the same viral infection through their communication networks. Ships that had been invincible for millennia were turning on each other, their organic systems corrupted by human ingenuity. We studied your feeding process, your adaptive abilities, your shared consciousness, the human continued, and we realized that every strength can become a weakness if you know how to exploit it. Your ships feed on defeated enemies. We made ourselves poisonous. Your fleet shares information instantly. We made that network our delivery system. The Devourer's hull was beginning to crack as its organic components died. Through the growing holes, Kyungmin could see other biomechanical ships in similar states of collapse. The greatest war fleet in galactic history was becoming a graveyard. This is what humans do, Captain Jiho said, his voice growing fainter as the Resilience finally succumbed to the feeding process. We don't just fight with weapons, we fight with our minds, our determination, and our willingness to sacrifice everything for the future of our species. The transmission cut off as the human ship died, but its message had already spread across the galaxy. Every surviving species that had been conquered by the Vortani heard the words. Every world that lived in fear of the biomechanical empire learned that the unstoppable had been stopped. Admiral Kyungmin felt his neural implants failing as the Devourer's organic systems collapsed completely. In his final moments, he understood the terrible truth. Humanity hadn't won through superior technology or greater numbers. They had won through the most dangerous weapon in the universe, intelligence guided by absolute determination. The few Vortani ships that managed to escape the solar system carried word of the defeat across the galaxy. The empire that had ruled through fear for 2 millennia was broken, not by a mighty fleet, but by a single human destroyer and the brilliant minds that had planned its sacrifice. Across 3 galaxies, conquered species looked up at the stars with new hope. The Vortani Empire was finished, destroyed by their own success and humanity's refusal to accept defeat. Earth had proven that even the mightiest predator could fall to clever prey, and in the empty space where a great fleet had once threatened humanity's homeworld, only debris remained, drifting silent and cold among the stars. The Age of Vortani. Conquest was over. The age of human determination had begun. The end